The voice you call me may be nothing more than a collection of fears, desires, and borrowed opinions that Spinoza would never mistake for freedom. You know the feeling. Someone ignores you, and something tightens inside. Someone praises you, and suddenly you feel real. Someone challenges your opinion, and before thought even begins, defense rises like a wall. You spend energy protecting an image you cannot fully describe. You compare yourself to others without choosing to. You feel small in certain rooms and large in others, not because anything true has changed, but because the mirror in the room changed. This is not weakness. This is the ego at work, and it is exhausting. The pressure to maintain that image never rests. You craft how you speak. You monitor how you are received. You remember every moment someone underestimated you, and you carry it like evidence of something you must disprove. Pride flares when you are recognized. Insecurity crawls back the moment recognition fades. The need for approval becomes so woven into daily life that you stop noticing it operates at all. It simply feels like being alive. But Spinoza would say that what you are calling life may be a very sophisticated form of bondage. What this video will not offer you is comfort. It will not tell you to love yourself more or silence your inner critic with affirmations. Spinoza does not work that way. What Spinoza offers is understanding, and understanding, in his philosophy, is the only thing that genuinely weakens what controls you. By the end of this, you will see why the ego feels so real, why it bleeds so easily when touched, and why the moment you truly understand what it is made of, it begins to lose its grip on everything you do. Most people believe the ego is the self. They believe that when they feel offended, it is their authentic self responding to injustice. When they feel proud, it is their true self being recognized. When they feel envious, it is their honest self admitting what it wants. But look more carefully. That offense you felt, did it arise from your values or from the fact that someone saw you as smaller than you believe yourself to be? That pride, was it yours? Or was it the relief of finally receiving from others what you could not give yourself? The ego presents itself as identity, but what if it is something else entirely? What if most of what you defend as your personality is actually a collection of effects? Effects of how you were treated as a child. Effects of what your culture told you a worthy person looks like. Effects of past rejections that taught you to build walls before anyone could get close enough to reject you again. Spinoza understood something that most people live an entire lifetime without confronting. The self you experience is not a fixed, sovereign thing sitting at the center of your mind. It is a process. And that process has causes that most people never examine. Here is where the prison reveals itself. When you identify completely with the ego, you do not simply have reactions. You become the reactions. Someone insults you and it does not feel like an event passing through. It feels like an attack on what you fundamentally are. Someone ignores you. And the silence does not simply feel uncomfortable. It feels like evidence that you do not matter. The ego converts every external event into a verdict about your worth. And once that conversion happens, you are no longer free. You are a prisoner waiting for the next verdict. The ego needs to be confirmed continuously. It needs praise to feel real, comparison to feel superior, and memory to justify its grievances. Think about the last time you rehearsed an argument in your mind against someone who had wronged you. You were not solving a problem. You were feeding the ego's case for its own importance. Think about the last time you scrolled through someone else's success and felt something collapse inside you. That collapse was not truth. It was the ego measuring itself and finding the result unbearable. The hidden enemy is not the person who insulted you. It is the structure inside you that made their opinion the measure of your reality. And this prison has a quality that makes it especially difficult to escape. It feels like protection. The ego tells you that your defensiveness is dignity, that your pride is self-respect, that your envy is ambition, that your need for recognition is simply knowing your own worth. It dresses the chains in the language of strength, and so you guard them, you defend them. You mistake the walls of the prison for the shape of your freedom. Spinoza would call this one of the deepest forms of human bondage. Not because the person is weak, but because the illusion is so perfectly constructed. Nowhere is this prison more visible today than in the architecture of modern life. Social media did not create the ego, but it built the ego a cathedral. Every post is a signal. Every silence is an absence of signal. Every comparison happens in real time, with numbers attached. Followers, likes, views, comments. These are not simply metrics. For the ego, they are oxygen. And when the oxygen is withdrawn, even briefly, the reaction is not mild. It is disproportionate in a way that reveals how deep the dependency runs. You were not upset because a number changed. You were upset because the ego's proof of existence was momentarily withheld. Status, beauty standards, productivity culture, personal branding, all of it feeds the same machine. You are asked to curate yourself, to perform yourself, to optimize yourself for reception by others. And slowly, the boundary between who you perform and who you actually are becomes impossible to locate. You begin to feel that if the performance fails, you fail. If the image cracks, you crack. This is not a minor social inconvenience. This is the ego trap operating at full force in the middle of daily life. And Spinoza's warning is simple. A self that requires constant external confirmation is not a self at all. It is a dependency with a name. If any part of what you have heard so far has named something you have felt but never been able to describe, consider pressing the like button before we go deeper. Not for the channel, for the next person who is tired of defending a self they do not fully understand, and who needs this conversation to find them. Baruch Spinoza was excommunicated at the age of 23, expelled from his community, condemned by his city, and left to think alone. And what he concluded in that silence was this: the human mind does not govern itself as freely as it imagines. The belief that you are a sovereign self, freely choosing your reactions, independently forming your opinions, standing apart from the world as its author. Spinoza called this an illusion. not to humiliate you, to free you, because the illusion of isolated self-command is exactly what keeps the real causes hidden. And hidden causes are the engine of suffering. Spinoza looked at the human being and saw something neither religion nor common sense wanted to admit. The mind is part of nature. It does not stand above causes. It is moved by them. When you feel wounded by a criticism, that wound did not appear from nowhere. When you feel the hunger of envy, that hunger has a history. When you feel the desperate need for approval, that need was built inside you by specific experiences, specific absences, specific lessons your environment repeated until they became invisible. The ego for Spinoza is not your deepest nature. It is a reactive structure formed by causes you have almost certainly never fully examined. Consider what actually happens when someone insults you. The insult arrives. Something inside rises. You feel heat or contraction or a sudden need to prove something. Most people experience this sequence and call it their personality responding to injustice. Spinoza would ask a different question entirely. He would ask, what in your past made this specific comment capable of producing that specific reaction? Because the reaction is never simply about now. It is about everything that trained you to be vulnerable to precisely that kind of wound. Memory is one of the first causes. If you were mocked for being too sensitive when you were young, the word sensitive used as criticism today does not land on an empty surface. It lands on that old wound, still open. The reaction you feel is not a fresh response to a present event. It is a reactivation of something much older. The ego carries memory the way a wound carries a bruise. Press on it, and the pain feels current, but the origin is in the past. Spinoza's philosophy insists that you cannot understand your reactions without tracing them back through time, through conditioning, through the causes that built the structure you now call yourself. Desire is another cause. The ego is constructed around wants. The want to be respected, to be seen, to be superior in some valued dimension, to be loved, to be right. When reality refuses to honor those wants, the ego does not simply feel disappointed, it feels attacked. Because it has made those desires the condition of its own existence. Spinoza understood that desire is the very essence of human life, but desire that has no understanding of its own causes is desire that controls the person, not the other way around. When you are driven by the fear of being invisible, or by the hunger for admiration you never received, you are not expressing freedom. You are obeying causes you have never named. Spinoza drew a line that changes everything once you see it. On one side of the line, passive emotions. These are the states that happen to you. The insult that blinds you, the praise that inflates you, the comparison that deflates you. They are called passive not because they are weak, but because in them you are acted upon. You are the effect. The external world is the cause. And while you remain passive, you remain unfree. On the other side of the line, active understanding. This is not the absence of feeling. It is the presence of knowledge about what you are feeling and why. When someone ignores you and you feel the sting of invisibility, that feeling does not have to rule you. The moment you trace it, this feeling comes from a history of not being seen, and today's moment activated that history. You are no longer simply inside the reaction. You are observing it, and observation changes your relationship to the cause. It does not erase pain, but it stops pain from becoming your commander. The ego is insulted, ignored, or praised, and those events control you only as long as their causes remain invisible. The person who receives criticism and spirals has not seen what inside them made the criticism so devastating. The person who receives praise and immediately needs more has not traced why the approval has become addictive. But the moment you bring understanding to those mechanisms, something shifts. You do not stop feeling. You stop being controlled by feelings you have not examined. This is what Spinoza means by active understanding, not detachment, not coldness. Clarity about the cause, and clarity is the beginning of freedom. You are not broken. If your ego has been running your life, it is not because you are weak or spiritually failed or constitutionally incapable of clarity. It is because no one showed you how to look at the mechanism. The ego is not a character flaw. It is a structure that formed under conditions you did not choose, in response to experiences you did not fully control. To feel defensive when criticized is not shameful. To need approval is not pathetic. These are human responses with real causes. The problem is not that you have them. The problem is when you believe they are the final truth of what you are. Spinoza's philosophy is not a system of blame. It does not say, "You should have known better." It says you could not have done otherwise given what you understood at the time. That is not a sentence designed to remove responsibility. It is a sentence designed to remove unnecessary shame so that real understanding can begin. Shame keeps the causes hidden because it makes examination feel like self-attack. Understanding opens the causes to light, and in the light, something becomes possible that shame never allowed: genuine change. What is being asked of you here is not self-destruction. It is not an instruction to abandon your desires, silence your feelings, or pretend you have no needs. It is an invitation to look at the structure that formed around those needs and ask whether it is serving you or governing you. The ego has been defending you. That impulse is not evil, but a defense system built entirely on imagination, fear, and the desire for approval is a defense system that has become a prison. And Spinoza says the door out of that prison is not willpower. It is understanding. Here is how the ego actually operates. It builds a mask, not a conscious mask in most cases. A mask that formed slowly, shaped by every experience that taught you which version of yourself was acceptable and which was dangerous to show. The mask becomes so familiar that you forget it is a mask. You begin to experience it as your face. And then reality arrives, unscheduled, unfiltered, indifferent. And it doesn't respond to the mask the way the mask expected. Someone fails to admire you, someone contradicts you, someone succeeds where you believed you were superior. And the mask cracks. Not because you were attacked, because the mask was not made of substance. It was made of desire and fear. Behind the mask is a mirror, and the ego spends enormous energy managing that mirror. It needs the reflection to be favorable. It filters what it shows you of yourself. It amplifies confirmation of its value and suppresses evidence of its fragility. This is not dishonesty exactly. It is the natural operation of a mind that has learned to protect itself through image management rather than through understanding. But a mind that only sees its own favorable reflection cannot understand reality. And a mind that cannot understand reality is a mind that will continue to suffer from its collisions with it. Beneath the mirror is a puppet. This is the uncomfortable image. When the ego is fully in command, you are pulled by strings you cannot see. Praise pulls you up, criticism pulls you down, attention fills you, silence empties you. You do not choose these responses, they happen to you. The puppet believes it is dancing freely, but watch the strings long enough, and the motion becomes entirely predictable. The person who always needs to be right in an argument, the person who cannot receive a compliment without deflecting or a criticism without retaliation. The person who performs casualness about things that secretly devastate them. These are not personality quirks. These are strings being pulled by causes that have never been examined. Spinoza called this human bondage, not as an insult, but as a precise description. The person who lives entirely through ego reactions is not free. They are reactive. Every event in the external world produces a corresponding movement inside them, and that movement feels like life but functions like programming. The praise arrives and the program says, "Feel worthy." The criticism arrives and the program says, "Feel threatened." The comparison arrives and the program says, "Feel inadequate or superior." And the person obeys, not because they are powerless, but because they have not yet seen the mechanism clearly enough to step back from it. Here is the part that is most difficult to sit with. Much of what you call self-respect may not be self-respect at all. It may be dependence on a particular kind of external response. You know you are respected when others show it. You know you are valuable when others confirm it. You know you are right when others agree. The self is present, yes, but it is not the one giving the verdict. The verdict comes from outside, and the self simply receives it and calls the result its own inner conviction. That is not self-respect. That is a sophisticated form of approval addiction dressed in the language of dignity. This does not mean that caring about how others see you is always a form of weakness. Spinoza was not building a philosophy of indifference. He understood that human beings are social creatures, that relationships matter, that recognition has real value. But there is a difference between choosing with understanding to value connection and approval and being controlled by the fear of their absence. One is freedom expressing itself through relationship. The other is bondage expressing itself through the performance of relationship. And most of what the ego calls self-respect belongs, on closer inspection, to the second category. If something in this video is beginning to shift the way you see what you have been defending, leave the word freedom in the comments. Not because it is a ritual, because naming what you are beginning to understand is the first act of a mind that is no longer entirely passive. And that small act matters. The first move toward freedom is deceptively simple and genuinely difficult. When a defensive reaction rises inside you, do not follow it immediately. Pause and ask, what caused this? Not who is to blame, not whether you are right or wrong. What caused this specific reaction in this specific moment? Because the reaction is telling you something, not about the person who triggered it, about the structure inside you that was vulnerable to precisely that kind of trigger. Someone dismisses your opinion in a group, and you feel a familiar contraction. That feeling is not simply about today. Ask, where have I felt this before? Have I spent years feeling unseen in a particular way? Have I carried a belief that my voice is not worth hearing? The dismissal touched that place. The person who dismissed you did not create the wound. They revealed it. And revealing a wound, while painful, is the beginning of something Spinoza would recognize as progress. You cannot trace a cause you refuse to look at, and you cannot be free of a cause you cannot name. Be specific in what you name. I was upset is not a cause. I felt the fear of being small again is a cause. I felt the old terror of not being chosen is a cause. I felt the desperation of needing this person's approval in order to feel legitimate is a cause. The specificity is what gives understanding its power. Vague awareness produces vague relief. Precise understanding produces genuine freedom. Spinoza's entire method is built on this. The more accurately the mind understands the causes of its emotions, the more actively it can relate to them rather than simply suffering them. Once you have named the cause, the next step is equally important. You must separate the pain from what you are. The pain is real. The reaction is real. But it is not the final definition of who you are. It is a response. And responses, unlike essences, can be observed. They can be understood. They can, over time, change. When you say, I am a deeply insecure person, you are doing something that Spinoza's philosophy resists entirely. You're taking a pattern produced by specific causes and converting it into a permanent identity. That conversion is one of the most effective ways the ego traps a person inside their own suffering. You are not your wounded reaction. You are not the tightening in your chest when someone ignores you. You are not the hot shame when you fail publicly. You are not the cold envy when someone succeeds where you have struggled. These are movements inside you. They are not you. The moment you can observe a reaction from a slight distance, not suppress it, not perform indifference, but genuinely observe it, you have already created a small but real space between yourself and the ego structure. Spinoza would call that space the beginning of active understanding. And it is, in the most literal sense, the beginning of freedom. Practice this. The next time you feel the ego react, defensiveness, pride, envy, the need for approval, name it as a reaction rather than absorbing it as identity. Say internally, there is a reaction happening, not, this is who I am. The difference in language is not cosmetic, it is structural. It is the difference between being carried by a current and standing on the bank observing the water move. You are still near the river, but you are no longer submerged. Spinoza understood something that modern psychology would later confirm in different language. The mind is shaped by what it encounters. If you spend your time in environments built entirely around comparison, status performance, and the constant measurement of worth, you are not simply observing those environments, you are being formed by them. The causes that shape your ego reactions do not only come from your past, they are being renewed in the present by the encounters you choose or fail to choose. This means that one of the most concrete acts of philosophical freedom available to you is choosing your encounters more carefully. The social media feed that leaves you feeling subtly diminished every time you open it is not a neutral tool. It is a cause. The relationship where you are constantly performing your value and never simply understood is not a minor discomfort. It is a structure that reinforces ego dependency daily. The conversations that reduce every exchange to competition and hierarchy are not simply unpleasant. They are actively maintaining the conditions under which your ego stays reactive. Better encounters are not encounters without challenge. Spinoza would not recommend a life of comfortable insulation. He would recommend encounters with people, ideas, and environments that increase your understanding rather than your anxiety. Relationships that allow you to be seen without requiring a performance. Spaces that reduce the pressure of constant comparison. Habits of reading, thinking, and reflection that build adequate ideas rather than feeding imagination. Choosing these encounters is not retreat. It is one of the most active and deliberate exercises of freedom that Spinoza's philosophy makes available to the person who is beginning to understand themselves. The fourth step is the one that most resembles genuine wisdom. It requires you to accept that you did not choose the causes that built your ego. You did not choose the family that first taught you whether you were acceptable. You did not choose the social environment that defined worth for you. You did not choose the early wounds that made certain criticisms devastating. These things happened according to causes that preceded you. Spinoza called this necessity, and his philosophy insists that accepting necessity is not the same as accepting defeat. Accepting necessity means releasing the energy spent on resenting how you were shaped. That resentment is itself an ego operation. It says, I should have been different. The world should have treated me differently. I should not have these reactions. But Spinoza looks at nature and sees that everything follows from its causes. Judging the causes does not change them. Understanding them does. When you accept that your ego was formed under conditions of necessity, you are not surrendering to those conditions. You are freeing up the energy that resentment was consuming and redirecting it towards something more powerful. Genuine understanding. And here is the dignity that Spinoza restores to you at this step. Understanding your causes does not make you smaller. It makes you more honest, more precise, and more capable of real action. The person who understands why they react defensively is not weaker than the person who simply reacts. They are far more capable of choosing. They can see the mechanism before it fully operates. They can intervene not by force, but by knowledge. That is not passivity. That is the highest form of active engagement with yourself that Spinoza's entire philosophy points toward. seeing clearly, understanding deeply, acting from that understanding rather than from fear. Let us gather what has been revealed. The ego is not your deepest self. It is a reactive structure built by causes: memory, desire, fear, social conditioning, and the hunger for approval that most people have never fully examined. Every time you felt wounded by a criticism, inflated by praise, or hollowed out by comparison, that was not simply your authentic self responding to reality. That was a structure formed by causes playing out its programming. And while the programming felt like personality, Spinoza would recognize it as a form of bondage. Validation, which the ego treats as proof of existence, is actually a form of dependency. When your sense of worth requires constant renewal from outside sources, you are not free. You are in a relationship of dependency with the opinions of others. Every like, every compliment, every agreement becomes necessary not because it is genuinely informative, but because the ego cannot generate its own ground. Understanding this dependency is not humiliation. It is illumination, because you cannot weaken what you refuse to see. And you cannot see clearly while the ego is using every available defense to convince you that the prison is actually your home. The shift that Spinoza's philosophy makes possible is not the elimination of self. It is the deepening of self. When you stop defending the ego as if it were your essence, you do not disappear. Something quieter and more durable becomes available. Not the reactive center that rises and falls with every external verdict, but the part of you that can observe, that can trace causes, that can understand its own mechanisms with something approaching honesty. That is not a smaller self. That is a freer one. You are no longer the defendant in a perpetual trial where the world's opinion determines the verdict. You become something closer to what Spinoza imagined when he wrote about a human being acting from reason rather than passion. Not cold, not detached, present, clear, capable of being moved without being swept away, capable of caring without depending, capable of wanting without becoming enslaved to the want. The ego defender and the observer of causes are not two different people. They are two different relationships to the same causes, and you have the capacity to choose the second one more often than you currently do. Return now to where this began. The voice you call me, that voice is real. But what Spinoza reveals is that much of what fills that voice, the defenses, the comparisons, the hungers, the wounds wrapped in pride, those were not born with you. They were built by causes, conditions, history. And what is built by causes can, at least partially, be understood, and what is understood loses, at least partially, its invisible power over you. The voice you call me does not have to be a collection of borrowed fears forever. Understanding is how it becomes something more genuinely your own. If this philosophy has moved something in you, if you want to keep examining the causes that govern emotion, desire, guilt, fear, and freedom through the lens of Spinoza, then subscribe to Spinoza Reveals. This channel is not built for entertainment. It is built for the person who is ready to understand rather than simply endure. Subscribe and return. Because the work of inner freedom is not a single video. It is a practice, and it begins, as Spinoza always insisted, with understanding.